These gnomes represent how well prog is going for the community right now in Cata, which is why we need my ultimate tips guide as soon as possible to make raid wiping a thing of the past. So let's get right into the 5 major reasons why your guild either isn't progressing or you're wiping just so much in Phase 1. Really, it starts with the lack of understanding of wipes. Either your guild leader talks about it for 20 minutes, or you don't even know why you wiped in the first place. Then the second major reason why you're wiping or not progressing as much as you should in Cata is that your healers just aren't pulling their own weight. And with this expansion being so healer focused, we've got to get them into shape fast. The third major reason why your guild isn't getting as much progress as you want is that your guild doesn't have the ideal enchants, gems, gear itself. I can show you how to find all the problems with all your raiders gear really fast, so everything is in tip-top shape. So another reason why your progress might be stagnating is that you're not picking the right bosses for heroics. So I'm going to get you the exact bosses to do week 1 and week 2, so that you don't spend a bunch of time wiping on bosses that are just way too hard. So the fifth and perhaps biggest problem is that your guild isn't getting the right loot to the right people quickly enough. And that's going to lead to not only a lot of morale issues, but also very big short-term performance issues that are really going to impede your ability to do heroics as well. So jumping into the first issue, one of the 5 biggest major problems in Cataclysm progression is that you'll go in, you'll pull, you'll wipe, and then you'll spend either 20 minutes discussing what went wrong, or you'll just go right in again for another pull, and then what happens is you don't really learn what's going wrong. You're wasting so much time with these failed pulls, people are leaving, it's just a disaster. So there's this tool I've been using this week, and it's really improved my understanding of our wipes, and that is Wipefest. You can instantly see the Hellstone usage, potion usage, who's pre-potting. You can see missed interrupts, extra damage taken from every single mechanic. So on Onyxia, for example, we kept wiping because our tanks would get clapped, and then we saw that, okay, the tanks are too close together. It literally told us on Wipefest, and so we were able to fix that problem and actually kill the boss and get the loot. Or for example, you could see who's not soaking the mechanics on Valiona. So the way you do it is you just make sure somebody in your raid is doing live logging to Warcraft logs, and then you're just going to input the URL into Wipefest, which I'll link below the video, and then you can immediately start analyzing all your pulls in real time. So another one of the 5 major problems in progression rating your guild is definitely facing right now. Your healers they're not getting the job done. So your tank's playing perfect, your DPS, they're blasting those big fire mages, and then the raid just melts every single pull. So here's the truth. Healers have been coasting along for 3 expansions now. In Cataclysm, it's time for them to actually pull their weight. So really the first big problem is the healer gearing itself. For DPS for years, they've been simming on all these very well-made, high-tech simulators to figure out exactly what the best choice of gear is. Healers, meanwhile, they just kind of pick from a list of items, and maybe they go for a haste breakpoint and they call it good. But these savvy retail healers, they've been using this tool called Questionably Epic. So you just import your gear using the CurseForge add-on. It's going to tell you the exact optimal enchants to run based on math. It'll tell you exactly what gems to run. It'll show you exactly how much mana you'll have in the fight, how your HPS will likely look in the fight if you're playing optimally. And you can also compare gear, which is even better. A classic example being the Staff of Sorcerer Thane Thracian, 359 item level. How does it compare to, say, an Incineratus? Well, if you put all those items in, you can immediately see a 1.46% HPS decrease with that two-handed staff. On the same website, if your healers are just not grasping their rotations fully, well, there's this whole page for exactly the optimal heals. Your healers are going to understand exactly how to play their roles so much better. An example being that I instantly realized how key Swift Mending is by just spending a second on the page. And let me tell you, the second I started pumping Swift Med on CD, my HPS was just completely skyrocketing. So just a quick note on this tool, it's only completely finished for Resto Druid right now. But in the near future, it should be ready for all healers so they can start really pulling their weight in the raids. So still on that, the healers aren't doing their jobs part of the video. There is a core part of the healer rotation that a lot of healers are missing. The thing is, we're completely out of the mana pot game now, and a lot of healers still don't know that. See, we've been rushing through heroic dungeons and raids, and we've been taking so much damage, and it feels like we're always casting and we're out of mana. The thing is, we've been using the completely wrong mana pot this whole time. At least I know I was. The real mana potion you should be using in almost 99% of fights. It's the Potion of Concentration. So 22,000 mana for the Potion of Concentration, 10,000 mana for the Mythical Mana Potion. The downside of the Potion of Concentration, it puts you to sleep. The key here is on a fight like Nefarian, I know exactly when I'm not going to be taking very much damage, the raid's not dying, so I can use a full value potion of concentration. So another crucial thing that always seems to mess up with raid progression is not being fully aware of the status of your raid. The biggest one being the availability of raid cooldowns, seeing all the tranquilities, the hymns of hope available. This is such a cooldown focused expansion. It's not just that though, it's whether your raiders have the right gear, the right talent builds. If you're struggling to keep up with all your raiders and making all those big calls, it's not just you. The rotations in Cata are way more complicated. It's a lot to manage. This is where Method Raid Tools enters the scene, and I no longer think this is an optional add-on. I believe it is 100% required for all raiders. With this tool, I can immediately inspect everybody in my raid. I can mass check everybody to make sure they have all their food consumables, their buffs, everything. One of the most underrated features, though, is the ability to check if everybody has the same weak aura pack. So in my raid, I really heavily push the Merfin weak aura pack because it's completely free. You should get in the link below the video. It shows all the timers, all the cooldowns, everything you need to succeed in the raid. In order to make sure as many people had it as possible, I could use the weak aura section of the Method Raid Tools, and then I could personally DM people and be like, okay, hey, you should go get this pack, it'll really help us. So now we're getting into the 4th Cata raid progression commandment. That commandment is specifically to pick the correct bosses for the week 1 progression. We've all got limited time to raid, and spending 4 valuable hours of progression raiding heroic Alec here, it's just really not a good idea. See, it is way better to go in with an idea of doing a bunch of normal modes, and then picking just a very few select number of heroic modes to do, and that way you can maximize your time efficiency and your loot as well. A really good example of this would be all the normal mode groups in ICC. They would sneak in that gunship clear as well in heroic. That way they would get the heroic gunship clear, but they would also be doing a very fast, efficient run too. So for 10-mans, in my opinion, there really is not that gunship level boss fight. Maybe the biggest reason for that is just that there are so many DPS checks, so many heal checks, and ultimately, yes, you could do the mechanics better, but having more gear is just going to make your experience so much easier. As for 25-man, where the fights are a little bit easier, my own personal opinion that every single Blackwing Descent heroic is not worth doing the first week. The raid is already long enough. It took us over 3 hours to complete the full raid. Now, from my own personal experience and my beta experience too, I would say heroics like Atramedes, Chimerian, these are all doable if you have an hour or 2 to spend progressing. But if this is your only raid night or one of only 2 raid nights, I really wouldn't recommend doing any of those in heroic mode. As for Bastion of Twilight, the easiest heroic is definitely Halfus, and this is not necessarily your gunship, but it is the closest thing you're going to get. But under no circumstances should you ever consider doing Alakir heroic unless you have a full day of progression ready. So the final and perhaps most important key to avoid getting your raid literally wiped out, Roman style, is to use a loot prio sheet. So by now you've probably done a few hours of the raids. You've experienced all the joys of handing out loot, receiving loot. The problem is knowing which pieces of gear will actually improve your guild's output, so that you can do those heroics next week and absolutely slay them. And that is where this loot prio sheet I've linked below the video really comes in handy, because you can instantly get this rough idea of where each piece of loot should be going. But the thing is, I hate tabbing out and looking at every piece of loot in a spreadsheet. That's why I recommend importing the sheet into the game. You could actually do that with the Insanity Master Loot add-on. Now at this point, I could get into all sorts of other tools and add-ons to make your raid progression so much better. So for example, the Merfin Consume Weak Aura that lets you know anytime your flasks fall off, which is amazing. But really this video was about the 5 major reasons why you might end up in a Wipefest and how to get out of them. We covered those really awesome tools to figure out exactly why you wiped, so you can never make the same mistake twice. We talked about those unprepared healers that are causing raid wipes, and how to get them into mythic raiding shape in no time at all. We solved how to quickly scan your entire group for missing enchants, gems, consumes. Then we saved hours of time from wiping on heroics by actually prioritizing easier bosses like Halfus and just skipping the rest of them for week 1. And finally, we made the loot so much easier to manage and give out with a loot prio sheet and a combination tooltip add-on that makes the game way more fun to play. I've got to ask, how is your raiding going, guys? For me, I've had way more fun than I thought I would, and healing on a Resto Druid has been an absolute blast. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to subscribe, you will most likely be invited to some kind of awesome viewer raid in the future if you're on my server, or maybe not if you're at the very bottom tier of the DPS tier list, which you should click on right now to make sure you're not there.